Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Armenian News Network Groong Week in Review for August 17, 2025. Today, we're talking with Sergei Melkonian, who is a research fellow at APRI Armenia, a Yerevan-based think tank.
But first, folks, thanks for listening to us, and we appreciate the trust that you put in us to bring you consistent, fact-based analysis of Armenian news. And we do so, if I might say, without any foreign agent funding. We are completely independent, just two people trying to contribute to Armenian news. But we also want to earn your support because we need that to take our podcast to the next level. We have a goal for ourselves to reach a sustaining membership revenue of $1,000 a month. Now, that is pretty far-fetched today because we're not even at 20% of that. We have a lot of expenses just to keep the lights on, so we're not even meeting our expenses. But if you do have a few dollars to spare, consider giving us a one-time or recurring contribution through Patreon or Buy Me a Coffee. Our website is podcasts.groong.org/donate, and over there you can find all the different ways you can contribute to us.
We know that financial support is not for everyone. If that is the case with you, you can still help us. You can comment, like, and especially share our shows with your friends and your colleagues on social media, because that's going to help us a lot. It'll bring new readers and it'll get our message out to more people.
All right, on to the show.
Dr. Melkonian, welcome back to the Groong podcast.
Good evening. It's always a pleasure to be with you. Thanks for the invitation.
Welcome, Sergei. Let's begin with the Alaska summit. So just if you've been under a rock for the last 2 weeks, there was a summit in Alaska that took place on Saturday. Many speculated that it could be Yalta 2.0, recalling the 1945 pact between United States, United Kingdom, and USSR that essentially redrew the world map, the post-war world map. And some analysts even expected that the Trump route and the South Caucasus in general would be on the table at the summit. But judging by official readouts, the talks were confined to Ukraine. Trump and Putin essentially agreed that the core issues of the war in Ukraine must be tackled first.
Hovik, it does sound like actually the summit was cut pretty short. It lasted a lot less time than they thought. And also, I think Trump had planned a fairly lavish working lunch, so-called working lunch, but that didn't happen either. So either agreements were reached extremely quickly or they were frustrated and were done with the summit very quickly.
Well, let's ask our guest that, because yes, I've seen also differing interpretations that they agreed on what they agreed and they didn't agree on what they didn't agree, but there were some agreements. And today, Trump is hosting Zelensky in Washington, along with leaders of European states, now taking a harder line against Moscow than Washington itself. That list includes Friedrich Merz, Britain's Keir Starmer, and Emmanuel Macron. So, Sergei, what is your take on the current state of the war in Ukraine and what took place in Alaska last week?
$1 billion question, right? First,
I don't have that, but yes.
We should admit that Russia-US agenda is pretty large. It's not only about Ukraine. So this is why Alaska summit was neither Tehran conference nor Yalta conference. So it was just about preliminary agreements, or partly to agree on the second part of the agenda. Because again, Russia-US negotiations, they include restoration of US-Russia diplomatic ties. It includes Ukraine. It includes security in Europe. It includes Iranian file, Middle East, non-proliferation, strategic stability. So the agenda is really large. So, and it's not only about Ukraine, but obviously the key issue was how to make a deal on Ukraine. And as far as we understand, as Hovik mentioned, President Trump now hosts President Zelensky in White House. So it means that there is a process. So it means that there are some preliminary agreements in Alaska. And based on statements that we heard from Witkoff, from Trump, and other officials, So we may assume that most probably Russia was able to agree with the United States that they should not focus on a ceasefire, but rather they should discuss a comprehensive agreement. So it means, and obviously Trump is interested to finalize all the process, because the ceasefire is not the peace. So, but Trumpers want to be a major peacemaker in the world. So he also would like to have a kind of comprehensive peace agreement. And Russia was able to kick the ball on the Ukrainian side, because Russia put its own preconditions, demonstrating that Russia is ready to have a comprehensive peace agreement.
What are some of those preconditions?
So for Russia, as far as we understand, so they did not change their red line. So at least Crimea and Donbass should be recognized as Russian territories. And then the next step, obviously, other regions also should be agreed under Russia's sovereignty, because this is Russia's red line, and Russia didn't do step back for these years. Second, it's about status of Ukraine. So Ukraine should not be neither a member of NATO, neither a member of EU. It also includes that zero external presence should be on other part of Ukraine. These are two key security concerns for Russia. Then it comes the right of Russian language, Russia's Orthodox Church, etc., etc. But as we see, the European leaders, they were, let's say, in a high level of alert after Alaska summit, because it was clear that if US and Russia are able to make pressure on Zelensky, because this is what is taking place right now, it means that Europeans will be out of making security architecture in the eastern part of Europe. And the key power that will shape the architecture, there are two powers, United States and Russia. And both Ukraine out and Europe is out. So it means that if the world order changed, and this is a new modus vivendi, it means that in other parts of Europe, also the new architecture might be shaped by non-European actors.
Judging from Zelensky's defiance and the hardline notes stuck by Paris, Berlin, and London, much of Moscow's package already looks dead on arrival. So, we as Armenians put a lot of importance on the end of the Ukraine war as soon as possible, because we expect that it would help increase Russia's attention to South Caucasus. So the question, I guess, is partly motivated by that. Do you see a negotiated end to the Ukraine war, given what has happened on Saturday and all the statements that we're hearing today?
The best case scenario in terms of negotiation, that might be preliminary agreement on a ceasefire or some temporary solution, because it's impossible to resolve the conflict within one or two agreements. The same is with the Washington summit that was on August 8th. So it's obvious that Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict is not over, even if the so-called peace deal was initial. So this is not enough. So there should be a kind of process. Russia should provide security guarantees both for Ukraine and for Europe. At NATO plus Europe plus US plus Ukraine, they should provide some security guarantees for Russia to solve each other's security dilemmas. And even coming back to the first part of your question, even if they start to solve somehow the conflict in Ukraine, it doesn't necessarily mean that Russia will shift its focus to the South Caucasus until the security dilemma still will exist from Europe, and we see the level of military production in Europe continues to increase. So Russia will still pay more attention to its western flank, will keep much more troops there, will keep administrative resources there, rather than refocus to the South Caucasus, Central Asia, other part of post-Soviet space.
And in general, how do you think the war is going? Because we've heard that many experts opine that this war will be decided on the ground.
Yeah, I'm not an expert in military, but as how I was able to follow the developments in Ukraine, there is a combination of the change that happened on the ground and diplomacy, and it's important to gain the momentum. For example, when Ukrainian forces were able to keep under control big part of Russia's Kursk region, so Ukraine has much more better position to swap territories to have a qualitatively different peace deal with Russia. Now, when Russia controls some territories outside of Donbass, and Russia took back all the Kursk region, so it means the situation has changed, and Russia tries to again put more pressure on diplomacy while it has dominant position, because nobody knows what will happen, for example, in 6 months. But when we talk with the Russian colleagues, most of them, they are convinced that so they are ready to continue the war in 2025, in 2026, despite new sanctions or more pressure from Europe. So there is no clear timeline, at least from Russia's perspective. For example, until December 31st, 2026, they should end the war. So there is no such timeline for them.
Sergei, the Alaska summit came on the heels of a meeting in the White House a week before that, where Pashinyan, Aliyev, and Trump put their initials on an agreement for the so-called Trump route, slicing through Syunik. Most Western countries congratulated that it was a great agreement, but the two key stakeholders outside of Armenia and Azerbaijan were Russia and Iran. And Tehran's response was split, where the foreign ministry gave a fairly cautious nod saying Iran's interests appeared to be safeguarded. But voices close to the supreme leader fired back with stern warnings that Iran would not permit U.S. troops on its border with Armenia. Meanwhile, Moscow kept it fairly diplomatic, and after Pashinyan called Putin after the White House meeting, Deputy Prime Minister Alexei Overchuk weighed in and said, if Armenia thinks that this path is good, then Russia supports it, since Armenia is still considered a strategic ally. But he did remind Yerevan of the cornerstones of its security that it should not ignore. He said the membership in the Eurasian Economic Union and the Russian base near Gyumri should be taken into account. The Russians have also stated that point 9 of the November 2020 trilateral ceasefire agreement is still in force in their view. And we should remind that point 9 of that statement talks about Russian control of this corridor, whether you call it the Zangezur corridor, the Trump route, or whatever you want to call it. So were Iran and Russia caught off guard by the Trump route, Sergei?
Obviously, there is a difference when we compare Russia's position and Iranian position. So for Iranian side, these developments are much more, let's call, sensitive, because if, for example, the railway connectivity will be restored, it will pass literally 10 meters far from Iranian border. It means that US affiliated companies will be deployed literally at Armenia-Iran border. Coming to the initial reaction, and there is a smooth shift, because as you mentioned, initially it was divided. So we have a conservative wing, mostly affiliated with the supreme leader, Mr. Vilayat and Mr. Harazi's statements that Iran will not tolerate any external presence when it goes to its borders. And we had a statement from Mr. Arakchi and Mr. Pezeshkian that Armenia was able to mitigate Iranian or nullify Iranian concerns related to this TRIP project because it will be carried within Armenia within all principles, territorial integrity, sovereignty, etc. But then, a few days later, we see that even position of Mr. Pezeshkian has changed. And now he's in Armenia. He did a new statement related to this project. that maybe this is not a good idea to have an external presence. And now they do not divide, is it military or it's civilian presence? So it's about general US presence in general. It means that maybe somehow the reformist bloc's narrative was somehow affected with the Supreme Leader's Office statements. And plus IRGC, there were statements from IRGC generals that it's, again, Iran will not tolerate. And they try to find a kind of consensus, because we see that there was not at least consensus on August 9 when they did these statements. But now we see that Iran is looking for a consensus around this project. And this consensus is shifting mostly to the in favor of conservative wings narrative, because the so-called Zangezur corridor for Iran is not about connectivity, it's not about economic prosperity, it's about security. This is why security bloc is in charge of this possible geopolitical change in the region.
Yeah, we've recently talked to an expert in Iranian affairs. He also said that basically there's a lot of friction between conservatives, and he called them constructivists inside the Tehran political columns in addressing this, because they perceive this as an effort to encircle or contain Iran and split it from Russia.
Yeah, and this is the biggest challenge for Iran as far as with the fall of Assad in Syria, with the problems with the Hezbollah, with Hamas, etc. Iran lost almost its access to Mediterranean. So it is cut from the west. Now it's close to be cut from the north, and it will be detached from Russia. And we know that there are problems with the connectivity with the north-south.
Right.
There are three routes. First is Caspian, eastern branch, passing through Central Asia, then Caspian, then Western. Within Caspian, again, there are problems. For example, Ukraine was able to strike Russian ports in northern part of Caspian Sea. There are problems with the level of water in the Caspian Sea, etc. The western section is mostly about railway connectivity via Azerbaijan. But as far as we see, there are tensions between Azerbaijan and Russia. Before that, there were tensions between Azerbaijan and Iran. So it's risky to put all eggs in one basket. And Armenia is a key alternative as the only Eurasian Union member state bordering with Iran who signed an FTA agreement with Eurasian Economic Union. So Iran extremely needs this alternative. And while there is such scenario that United States somehow might be deployed on its northern border, so that means the economic disaster and security disaster for Iran. This is why they will try to mitigate by any cost this challenge. This is why we have, for example, President Pezeshkian nowadays in Armenia.
Today, as a matter of fact.
Yes. Obviously, this trip, official visit was discussed before August 8, but it's quite important to have Iranian present in Armenia because at least Dr. Pezeshkian was twice in Armenia, in Azerbaijan, and the last time Iranian president paid official visit to Armenia was in 2019. Mm-hmm. So it was 6 years ago for the last time.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I was just gonna add, notably, it was before the 2020 war too, so that should be taken into account. And also, I wanted to, a lot of attention was cast by our previous guests on the makeup of the delegation. We know that Pezeshkian arrived with a pretty high power economic and political delegation. Do you know if the delegation also included military components or military parts?
There is a military official based on official photos that from today's meeting with the expert community and academic community. There is an advisor on foreign policy, Dr. Sanai. He's head of Iras think tank, and they pay attention to developments in the South Caucasus. It's also, this delegation includes a business part because yes, Armenia is an important neighbor for Iran, but the problem is based on 2024 data, our trade turnover is $737 million, so not so high. And then from Iran, we heard statements that they want to increase until $3 billion within coming years. It's really complicated issue. Despite Iran signing an FTA with the Eurasian Economic Union, we have some projects with Iran. Two Iranian companies are engaged in north-south connectivity in the southern part of Sunni, from Agarak to Kajaran, from Iranian border to Kajaran. Two Iranian companies, they construct railway tunnels, etc., to finalize the southern part of north-south route in Armenia. Then we are discussing a new gas supplies from Iran within this swap deal, gas and electricity. So we have something on the agenda, but $737 million is not enough for bilateral trade.
Sergei, was Overchuk's response a coping mechanism? Because what are Russia's interests and red lines in this corridor matter?
Russia's stance on Trump deal, obviously they were very cautious because the processes are taking place and Russia is completely out. And not only Russia focused on Ukraine, there is an important change when we talk about Russia's positions in the South Caucasus, tensions in Russia-Azerbaijani relations. Let me give you an example. During today's Putin's official visit to Baku in August 2024, Mr. Lavrov did statement that Armenia sabotaged unblocking communications in the region. And then there was a tough reaction from Iranian side. The Russian ambassador was invited to Iranian MFA. Mr. Demirchilu had a discussion with him explaining Iranian concerns. By the way, Mr. Demirchilu now is Iranian ambassador recently appointed to Azerbaijan. And Russia and Azerbaijan are making reference on Article 9 that Armenia is not ready to provide this route. But then, when tensions in Russia-Azerbaijani relations occurred within this fighter jet, within this airplane was crashed by Russia's air defense system in late 2024. We see this escalation did not allow Russia somehow to be engaged in regional affairs. So Russia has not good relations with Armenia. Russia-Azerbaijani relations deteriorating. So Russia cannot even use the toolkit to be somehow on the agenda.
Yeah, we want to dig a little bit deeper into the Russian-Azerbaijani relations in just a moment. Can I ask a question? Let's continue on this Trump route for just a second, Sergei. Because Pashinyan has insisted the Washington-endorsed Trump route safeguards Armenia's sovereignty and borders. He says the transit with Azerbaijan is also going to be strictly reciprocal and every agreement will be balanced, no strings attached. Okay, that's what he said. So the question is, what does Pashinyan mean by using the word reciprocal? Will Armenians be able to travel through Azerbaijan, for example, from Yerevan to Russia, or through Nakhichevan to Yerevan in a supposedly unimpeded manner? In fact, let me go just a slight provocative level more. Will they be able to do this without ever seeing an Azeri?
To be honest, I have no idea what did Mr. Pashinyan mean by reciprocal approach, because it means that in Nakhichevan, US affiliated company also should be deployed in Armenia that want to reach from Yerevan to Mehri, for example, should again have the same unimpeded access as Azerbaijani citizens traveling from Baku to Nakhichevan via Suv. And if, as for me, there is no US affiliated organization presence, and if there is no in Nakhichevan, if there is no unimpeded access for Armenians, it means that there is no reciprocity approach. That's first. Second, why there is no reciprocity? Because in this statement that it was signed, we see that they were discussing an exclusive approach only for the communication that Azerbaijan wanted. They were not discussing the unblocking all communications in the region. They were focused on the one communication. And Armenia will not benefit somehow from this communication. I mean, it's obvious because some, let's call them experts, try to portray that Armenia will benefit by becoming a regional hub because the connectivity will go from Baku to Mehri, then Nakhichevan, then Yerevan, then Gyumri, then Kars. But in fact, we have constructing Kars-Nakhichevan railway between Azerbaijan and Turkey. So it means that the connectivity will run from Baku to Mehri, Nakhichevan, then Kars.
That's right.
So the only 42 kilometers of Armenia that will be part of this connectivity project. Second, as my colleague Vahid Aftan mentioned just recently, the Baku-Tbilisi-Kars railway is using only 20% of its capacity. This is why when we talk about the so-called middle corridor, that's mostly like a bubble, because if there is Baku-Tbilisi-Kars railway that use 20% of its capacity, it means there is no a huge trade turnover between Central Asia and Europe within this middle corridor, and no one is going to spend money to improve its capacity. So it means that less goods will be used to transfer something from within this Trump project, if the Baku-Tbilisi-Kars is using less than 50% of its capacity.
What kind of traffic are we talking about over the Trump route that, for example, it's not good enough to put it through the Baku-Tbilisi-Kars railway?
You know, it's not even important. I will explain why. Because when we talk about connectivity projects, and not geopolitical projects, we should have a kind of feasibility study. And we will have a reference point to show that according to this research, there will be, I don't know, tens of thousands of tons of cargo pass via Sunik based on these calculations. But as far as there are discussions on blocking communication within almost more than the last 4 years, and we have zero feasibility study, it means it's not about economic benefit or integration in a global connectivity project, etc. It's about geopolitical interests.
Okay.
Okay. I want to take us back to Russia and Azerbaijan because there's some news even today about it. But to our listeners, I just want to set the stage. So over the past month, Russia has zeroed in on Ukraine's energy grid. This time, the strikes hit facilities owned by Azerbaijan's SOCAR, the state-owned company, the oil and gas company. Just as Azeri gas had begun flowing into Ukraine through the Trans-Balkan pipeline. And Russian and Azerbaijani relations were already spiraling after the December 2024 crash of the Azal passenger jet, as you mentioned, Sergei. So 2 weeks ago, after that attack, Aliyev issued a sharp warning to Moscow, saying that if Russian strikes continued against Azerbaijani assets, Baku would consider supplying arms to Ukraine. He framed it as a red line, saying that Azerbaijan could not stand by while its companies were attacked. Today, Russia seems to have answered that threat with force, launching multiple direct hits on SOCAR oil depots in Odessa and setting off massive fires. And of course, we know what's happening with the South Caucasus in Zangezur, which, as you said, seems to be intertwined into the Russian-Azerbaijani relationship. So you continue from here and let us know what are the core reasons why the Russian-Azerbaijani relationship is tanking, and also how it may affect geopolitics in the South Caucasus.
I think there are different layers in this tension. First is personal, between Aliyev and Putin, because Aliyev had higher expectations from Putin to publicly regret, expect condolences, 10 times say I'm sorry, etc., and do it many times in public, while based on what happened, for example, in November 9, 2020, when Azerbaijan shut down Russia's peacekeeper helicopter in Armenia.
Right.
And what happened in September 2023 when Azerbaijan killed Russian peacekeepers, including deputy head of command, based on their phone conversation. And Aliyev expresses regrets, etc. There was a kind of gentleman agreement. How do they solve these problems? But as far as we see, Mr. Aliyev, we expected much more from Mr. Putin. So this is some kind of personal problem. A second layer is bilateral. Azerbaijan tried to portray itself as a country that shifts from small states to middle power. This is why Azerbaijan should challenge great states, great powers, like France, with this so-called anti-colonial narrative. Now Azerbaijan tries to challenge Russia. Before that, I mean, after 2020 war, Azerbaijan was challenging Iran when there was a terrorist attack against Azerbaijani embassy in Tehran, and Azerbaijan started arrests Iranian citizens, etc., etc. And now Azerbaijan tries to challenge somehow Russia. Again, but it's not only about Azerbaijan, because based on June 2021 declaration, we should also keep Turkey in the mind, because it's not only about Azerbaijan. There is a big brother behind. And the second layer,
June 2020, do you mean the Shushi declaration?
Yes.
Okay.
And the third layer, as I see, is the regional one. For Azerbaijan was not able to change the regional configuration with the United States, while Azerbaijan didn't have high level of relations with the new administration. So Azerbaijan was not able to change the configuration in the South Caucasus with the United States, while it has good relations with Russia. So Armenia was able to increase its level of cooperation with the United States, yes, with previous administration, when Armenia signed a charter on strategic partnership. And there was a second part of this puzzle missing. It was Azerbaijan. So for Azerbaijan, it was important to distance itself from Russia somehow, to have free, have a window of opportunity to change the regional configuration as it wants with the participation of the United States. So there are three different layers, as I see.
Is the Trump route a symptom or a driver of the degradation of this relationship? It seems like you're painting it as a symptom. And how is Russia exactly reacting to these changes? Is Russia rethinking its strategy in the South Caucasus in any way?
Obviously, this is a symptom because even if we read Azerbaijani Constitutional Act, in the Azerbaijani Constitution, there is a reference to this Constitutional Act. We may see that Azerbaijan is anti-Russian narrative based as a new country that emerged after USSR collapse. Because if you read the Constitutional Act, it's written that Azerbaijan was occupied by Russians, resources were stolen, etc., etc. Azerbaijani people were suffering under Soviet occupation before it was Tsar occupation, etc. So this is a pure anti-Russian narrative-based country. But Russia didn't pay attention for that, because I mean, for Russian it's not even secondary when it was developing relations with Azerbaijan. Coming to what is important for Russia now, as far as I understand, Russia, at least some circles in Russia, they realized that they call it geopolitical compensation failed, because from Russian perspective, they try to replace pro-Western Armenia by pragmatic Aliyev to become a key Russia's partner in the South Caucasus. Now they realize that this approach failed, and losing Armenia, they lost Azerbaijan. But now still we see that Russia has almost zero strategy in the South Caucasus, based on the official statements, based on some expert comments, based on private discussions. So Russia is waiting when we talk about August 8th. And the key, not concern, but key pillar of the argument is, let's see what will happen. Because the same October 8th agreement might be like a November 9 agreement, and all this will not be implemented on the ground. It will just be left on the paper. And they see that this is a challenge for the United States to do anything, because from their perspective, it will be extremely complicated to implement all the deal on the ground and having United States long-term presence in the region. So it means that they will wait how the situation has changed, and after the Ukrainian case, they might be able to even include on the agenda with the United States the South Caucasus or Central Asia or some other Eastern European part.
Or Iran, as a matter of fact, because after the 12-day...
Iran is on the agenda, yes.
Yeah. After the 12-day US-Israeli war on Iran, Moscow was forced to recalibrate its entire regional posture, because this comes only months after Russia and Iran signed the Comprehensive Strategic Agreement. This was back in January of this year. And that pact was supposed to lock in long-term cooperation on energy, arms sales, regional security, and all kinds of cooperation. It was a comprehensive strategic agreement. Now, suddenly, the Kremlin is facing a dilemma: how to uphold its commitments and not antagonize other countries, not come into direct confrontation with countries like Israel and the United States. How is Russia reshaping its diplomacy with Iran after the war?
For Russia, the 12 days war was a big challenge, because for Russia it was obvious that Iranian partners will ask them not for economic support, but for military technical support, especially with fighter jets and air defense system.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as Iran said, Russia was not able to provide all the systems in time. But based on different OSINT research, we see that Russia sent some air defense system that Iran has deployed in Isfahan to secure nuclear facilities. But obviously this is not enough. And now the key military technical provider for Iran is China, not Russia. And maybe it was somehow on Russia-China bilateral agenda, when Russia was able to ask China that based on this agreement I should provide some assistance, but as you see, I'm not able. If it's okay for you, you may provide assistance to Iran.
So when you say that they were unable, do you attribute that to the Ukraine war again?
Yeah, obviously, because the sophisticated approach that Ukrainians are using against Russia doesn't allow Russia to even switch off one air defense system that might be both in Ural or moreover in the central part of Russia.
Mm-hmm.
So Russia needs much more air defense system because we see that the number of airstrikes from both sides, but from Ukrainian sides too, against Russia, it increased. So it means that Russia's air defense system is not prepared for the increasing number of Ukrainian strikes. And Russia was not able, no, it was able, but the cost will be higher if they put, for example, S-400 under St. Petersburg. It protects St. Petersburg and set to protect Isfahan. And I think that time at least they were not ready to pay this price.
If Iran is going to acquire some of these air defense systems from China, do you think that this is going to be a problem between China and Russia? Will they be competing or cooperating on these arms sales, or let's say being the number one partner of Iran?
I don't see that this is a problem for Russia because Iran was a military technical partner for Russia for a long time, but always there were different problems with S-300 supplies, with Su fighter jet supplies. So that was problematic. So this is not Algeria, for example, when Algeria is a traditional key Russia's military technical partner, and there are zero problems with it. And here, so Russia is not going to compete with Iran. But Russia tries to somehow reshape its stance and its approach in the Middle East. And maybe some Russia-Iran game may take place in the Middle East. Because, for example, we see how Syrian officials, the new jihadi government, asked Russia to relaunch its patrol in the south because they realized that they are not able to do anything with Israel. And not only Quneitra, but other Syrian provinces are in danger because Israel may occupy it within several weeks, and bringing some new external actor because Israel will not tolerate, for example, Turkish presence there. But Israel is fine with Russia's presence because there is an experience. There was the conflict mechanism that was working between Russia and Syria since 2015, 2016. And Russia is trying to find a kind of new role in some Middle Eastern cases. But as far as Russia is out, for example, from Palestinian agenda, so we may not talk about Russia's growing position in the region because this is the key, the core regional agenda.
Okay. Thank you, Sergei, for all these questions. We did a whirlwind through the region, but I want to bring us back to Yerevan. The new opposition movement, Our Way, started by billionaire Samvel Karapetyan, plans to challenge Nikol Pashinyan in the 2026 elections. At least that was announced by the movement's members, including Narek Karapetyan, his nephew, I believe. The group has distanced itself from former presidents Kocharyan and Sargsyan, who currently form the main parliamentary opposition, and instead aims to be a technocratic government. So despite his detention, political observers say that Karapetyan retains significant sympathy and influence among voters who are disillusioned by both the ruling regime and the mainstream opposition. There's also speculation that former Prime Minister Karen Karapetyan, no relation to Samvel, will also join or lead this new bloc. So what are your thoughts? Does the emergence of Our Way signal a real reshaping of political landscape in Armenia, and or is it just another recycled opposition project under a new label?
To answer this question, we should have an updated polls because based on last polls, Samvel Karapetyan was completely out because they didn't even state that they are going to launch their campaign, to have a political party, etc.
Are you talking about the IRI poll?
Yes,
Yes.
I'm talking about
which was
IRI.
conducted. Yeah, it was conducted before the launching of the party.
Yeah, that was in June, I think.
Yeah, so we need some new. Maybe I'm more than convinced that all political parties have their monthly based polls, etc. But it's not, open access, so we cannot do any kind of reference. But based on their statements, I see, as far as I see, they try to portray themselves as a alternative because now there is a lack of alternative based on IRI poll, when more than 40% of Armenians are not ready to vote for any political party. So as I see, they won't try to focus on this 30% of Armenian citizens that do not want neither former president nor ruling party. So they try to be somewhere in the middle. And here there might be different configurations. And obviously, they will depend on the final results, because again, we don't know how the campaign will take place. Now, obviously, many from different circles will blame them that they are completely pro-Russian. Someone will blame them that they are corrupted. So they will try to put labels to make them closer to the former presidents, to reduce the level of support. But as you mentioned, Narek Karapetyan, he stated that they are not going to run with Serge Sargsyan and with Robert Kocharyan. So this is the first strong statement, let's call this way, since the launch of political campaign. And there might be different configurations. There might be different alliances. It depends who will be in the parliament, because we have not only ruling party, former presidents, and Samvel Karapetyan, we have also Yerevan political alliance, most probably we will have some new political faces, but they are well known, serving on different positions in Armenia. So nobody knows what will happen.
Yeah. What is your take on Karen Karapetyan? People are speculating that he might be involved. I know you deal a lot with Russian circles, and he's currently in Russia at least. So you have more context than us in this regard. Do you think that he might get involved, and will his presence, or how will his presence, because he's seen, I think, in general as a popular and successful former prime minister, change the political weight of this new movement?
I may share only those that I heard from our diaspora. I mean, both from Russia and from St. Petersburg. The key point that I heard from them is Karen Karapetyan was very disappointed. Disappointed because he moved to Armenia to do something good, and actually he did really good things, starting from the reforms in legal sphere, and there were some other reforms that were, for example, initiated by USAID, and then they were paused for a long time when Karapetyan came. They started them, so there were a lot of changes during his time, and within this so-called revolution, he was disappointed because the agreements were not respected. It means that maybe there were some agreements that also included himself, and he is in a comfort zone now in Russia, and most probably he would not prefer to go out from the comfort zone and come back to Armenia. But these are diaspora discussions, so I don't know, is it
Take him for what it's worth, I guess.
I mean, and it's obvious that this is, when it comes to Russia, it's not only about the person decision. Yeah, if for example he will strongly disagree with his participation, definitely he will not participate. But if he will be under discussion, etc., but then he will be green lighted, let's call from the decision-making center, then I mean he will come. So there are different factors that may affect on his decision.
Yeah, because obviously Samvel Karapetyan himself cannot run yet because he's in detention, and if Pashinyan has his way, many say he would remain in detention. So do you see this arrest of Karapetyan, Samvel Karapetyan in this case, and the campaign against the church as Pashinyan's way of keeping power in 2026? And if not Karen Karapetyan, then who else would need to be involved, or what else would need to change? Some say that it will only increase, the repressions will only increase.
As I see, this is a part of big, larger agreement with Turkey and with Azerbaijan that includes different, let's call, files. It includes Artsakh file, it includes church file, it includes the so-called revanchist file, etc., etc. And Armenia's government now try to demonstrate that there is a political will to reach peace by any cost. And this is a very controversial based on the initial peace agreement. Because based on this peace agreement, Azerbaijan should not interfere in Armenian domestic affairs. But by Azerbaijani demand, Armenia is going to change the constitution. And we see that, again, by Azerbaijani demand and by Turkish demand, we see the campaign against church, because the timeline is important. The church stated that Nikol Pashinyan should resign right after the war. So why, for example, right after elections from June 2021, there was not campaign against church? Because if we pay attention to the timeline, we see that there are many coincidences within meetings and decisions of preliminary agreements between Armenia and Azerbaijan. So for Armenian government, it's important to demonstrate that Armenia is fully committed to peace process. Armenia will do everything needed to nullify any possible disagreement within society, because for Armenian government, it's important to have consensus among larger society within Armenia. So they pay less attention to diaspora. They try to detach diaspora from Armenia because for diaspora, it doesn't matter. Is it US diaspora or Russian diaspora? Because in most cases, Russian and American diaspora, they're on the same page. When it comes to Artsakh, when it comes to church, when it comes to concessions, etc., etc. So this is why, as I see, there is a detachment process of Armenia from diaspora, and they put many efforts to have a consensus that does not include somehow Artsakh file. And during today's press conference, Prime Minister Pashinyan literally stated about that we should forget about it if we want peace. And then he stated that there are territories under Armenian control, but they should be under Azerbaijani sovereignty. It means that most probably the next step forward is the not exchange, but maybe some new decision with the so-called enclaves.
More handovers, more concessions.
This peace process is based on unilateral concessions.
Yeah.
There is no other modus operandi how the peace may be reached, because we see that every year Armenia is doing concession by concession.
And that is what's needed. I mean, that's why a change is needed in the Armenian government, because as this government negotiates, it doesn't really negotiate. They're just unilateral handovers to the other side.
Based on these agreements, we have expectations, but Azerbaijan has benefits. Let me give you an example. Washington Summit, August 8th. What did Azerbaijan get from this statement? International recognition of unimpeded access from Azerbaijan to Nakhichevan. So there is one paper from November 9. Now they have one more paper. So there is an international consensus that this connectivity should happen, and this should be unimpeded access. Mm-hmm. Point number 2, Azerbaijan got a waiver of Section 907. They were struggling for all this time to reach this goal.
Let me insert one thing that is not entirely up to Trump to do. That's going to go to Congress, and Congress will have to agree with it, because that was not an executive.
The waiver is Trump's authority.
Well, Trump has the authority to waive it, and
which
1 year at a time.
Yeah, which is what he got.
One year at a time. So if he wants to completely cancel the Section 907 thing so that he doesn't have to deal with it anymore, not for the rest of his term or forever, then it's going to have to go to the House.
No, but what I mean is, like, every year since Section 907 has been in place, successive presidents have waived that until 2020 or 2021, right? When Biden decided not to waive it, or maybe it was 2023. But so the only gap has been that, and Trump has essentially restarted the waiver process continuously. So it seems like I don't know if even removing or striking Section 907 is even on the agenda. They don't need that.
So my point was that Azerbaijan has a concrete benefits. So within agreements, while we have expectations. So based on our analysis, it's obviously that this agreement will reduce the probability of escalation until the June 2026 elections. So that's something good for Armenia. What else is good? Maybe this connectivity agreement somehow will allow to open the Armenia-Turkish border. But this is discussable. Is it beneficial, or it's a challenge for Armenia? So I mean, we do not have a clear benefits. We have only expectations that one day peace will be signed. The aggression is not cancelled; it's just postponed. While Azerbaijan has changed on the ground, and the next change obviously will be connected with the enclaves and with Armenia's constitution. This is all that we have.
Okay, thank you. Just a quick note, Hovik, you were talking about Karapetyan, and I guess when it comes to talking about the new movement called Our Way, Mer Ձեվով, you have to keep your Karapetyan straight. It seems like everybody is Karapetyan. There's Samvel Karapetyan, Narek Karapetyan, and we have Karen Karapetyan, who is not related to them. So I hope that people who
So
have to join this movement don't have to change their names to Karapetyan, because then
so
we'll have
Karapetyan
Hovik
is one of the
Karapetyan and Asbed Bedrossian and Sergei Karapetyan.
so on top of that, Karapetyan obviously is a very popular Armenian last name, but also the first name, Samvel, Narek, and Karen are also probably in the top five of the first names. So very like it's like
Good luck
you
searching for
know
that. Yeah.
it's like John and Smith last names almost. But yeah, it's we now have to pay attention because there are more Karapetyans to talk about.
All right. Well, more coming on that topic, but let's wrap up for today. We've run out of time. I'd like to ask each of you, Sergei, Hovik, if there are things on your mind that you would like to share with our audience. Let's start with you, Sergei.
I think we should understand that Azerbaijan is not ready for a peace until we have conflict agenda. While Azerbaijan did not solve these issues, the following list of issues, we may argue that Azerbaijan is not interested in peace. First, the so-called Western Azerbaijan agenda. So this is revanchist Azerbaijani geopolitical ambitious agenda to replace Armenia by Western Azerbaijan. Second, we have still prisoners in Baku. So if we have prisoners, that it means that still conflict is on the agenda. Then, if Azerbaijan is really committed to peace, they should be recognize the rights of Artsakhi Armenians. So Azerbaijan should pay attention that there was an ethnic cleansing, and Azerbaijan should find a kind of solution what it may do within this process. So we have at least three issues on the agenda: what so-called Western Azerbaijan, prisoners in Baku, and we have ethnic cleansing conducted in Nagorno-Karabakh. And for Azerbaijan, all three issues are out of the so-called peace deal.
Thank you, Sergei. What's on your mind, Hovik?
I would like to continue on that topic because I think that many, of course, are celebrating and congratulating Armenia and Azerbaijan, even Western-funded, foreign agent-controlled news sources in Armenia. Meanwhile, many are just overlooking this simple component. If Azerbaijan was truly interested in peace, it would not set a precondition that is almost guaranteed to fail. The precondition I'm talking about is the change in Armenia's constitution, which requires, depending on how you calculate the number of voters in Armenia, it requires like 700,000 people to show up. That would mean that if the turnout is only 700,000, it would have to have 100% yes vote in order for the Armenian constitution to change. That will never happen. Now you can think, okay, how is Azerbaijan going to motivate, or how is Pashinyan, under Azerbaijan's guidance, going to motivate maybe 2 million Armenians to vote, come to the polling booth, so that maybe, I don't know, like 30% or 40% or 50% of them would vote yes? Because I believe besides just meeting quorum, there would have to be a 50% or 25%. I forget the exact, maybe Sergei would know. But in any case, it is a huge number of people that would have to vote yes on the Armenian constitution.
600.
Yeah, 600,000. And that's never going to happen. So Azerbaijan basically has guaranteed that a peace treaty will never happen as long as its preconditions remain. And as far as I know, Azerbaijan has doubled down on its preconditions and not pulled them back.
Okay. Thank you both for your thoughts. That was it for today. Thank you very much for joining us, Sergei. We hope to talk with you soon.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure. See you.
We appreciate your time and insight.
Thank you, Sergei Can.
Hovik, are we going to do a kitchen sink today?
Well, I noticed we've been skipping the kitchen sink, so of course we are, because there is no shortage of stories that are too hot, too weird, or just too corrupt to leave out. And I feel that we've been more politically correct than necessary recently, so this is also our opportunity to be more unhinged and more politically incorrect as we talk about these stories.
All right. Well, what's on your mind then?
So let's talk about our favorite character in Armenia. Of course, besides Nikol Pashinyan, is Tigran Avinyan, the mayor of Yerevan. So for years, the Pashinyan government has hammered away at Seyran Ohanyan's Lake Sevan property, only when it's convenient to do so and brushing it under the carpet at other times. And it has paraded this property as proof that the old guard enriched itself while ordinary Armenians struggled. But there is another Lake Sevan property. Actually, there are hundreds, but this one seems to be garnering less of the regime's attention. But the second property doesn't belong to an opposition politician. It belongs to one of Pashinyan's lieutenants, Tigran Avinyan, or his family, to be more precise. Tigran Avinyan's father, Armen Avinyan, to be even more precise. It is complete with swimming pools, auxiliary buildings, and even solar panel structures and so forth. This head investigation, which we'll link to, is pretty extensive. So, we'll just leave it for your further investigation in the show notes. Just to say that not all Lake Sevan properties are created equal. Some are.
And not all of them belong to opposition members.
Exactly.
Hovik, I wanted to talk a little bit about the case of the persecution of Archbishop Bagrat Galstanyan. The trial has now reached a stage where some of the evidence can be publicized, and the Srbazan's team released an unedited version of the audio recording a few weeks back that you recall. It went viral on civil contract botnets and stuff like that. Well, Srbazan denounced the proceedings as fake. We'll provide the links in the show notes, dismissing the charges as political theater. And critics argue that the case underscores the Pashinyan administration's campaign against the Armenian Apostolic Church, while supporters insist it is about holding clerics accountable under the law. In fact, let me just add one more thing. This has become a theme everywhere. You see these bought people or paid off people or whatever who come, and they all have the same language suddenly. While Pashinyan was going against the church, and they saw that Pashinyan has absolutely nothing to do with the church, has no jurisdiction over the church. Now they're saying everybody's on the same page, saying, "Oh, it's the people that they're going after, not the church itself."
Yeah. And before I go on, I just want to also mention that the senior investigative committee official in charge of prosecuting all of these opposition figures, whether it's Bagrat Srbazan, Mikhail Ajopahian, but also billionaire Samvel Karapetyan, has a week or so, or maybe 2 weeks ago, suddenly resigned. But coming back to the substance of what you said, Asbed, I want to highlight how ridiculous this is, because this is being painted not just as formers and so forth, but it's also being painted as Bagrat Srbazan being a pro-Russian politician, even though there's not a shred of evidence of doing that. And one of the sort of media that is one of the foreign-funded media in Armenia, the name sounds like it rhymes with botnet or something. It has net in the end. And one of the columnists for that media said, yeah, Pashinyan is cracking down on the opposition, but if you look at the details of that case, there's probably something there. So the details are out. The audio investigation has been released, and it's completely edited in such a way to present it as him plotting a revolution, where it's just discussion with his supporters. And in one of those discussions, I believe, let's say, I'm going to rephrase it and say, what's your thoughts on on capital punishment, right? And if you're in favor of capital punishment, then you're plotting a revolution. That's basically the logical chain that the Armenian government has followed, but it's not just a logical chain, it's actually the conversation has been edited in that manner. If you listen to it the first time, you think, wow, there's something very serious here. They're talking about shooting people, but imagine, those things can be recorded in any conversation among ordinary people, right? I mean, people are upset with the government, and you just imagine taking pieces out of that and putting them together in such a way that it makes it very incriminating evidence. Obviously, this case is going to go nowhere, I guarantee it, but this government is going to ride out as much as it can from it. And the main goal is to keep Bagrat Srbazan, Archbishop Mikhail Ajopahian, and Samvel Karapetyan in jail, however much they can.
Well, this is the kind of editing that Sergei Eisenstein would be very proud of.
Yeah.
What else is on your mind?
Okay, another thing that I want to turn your attention to is the infamous Azerbaijani Laundromat. Ever since Aliyev not only was able to start an illegal war against Armenia and without a peep from the world, Aliyev was able to ethnically cleanse Artsakh without a peep. So this seems to be very minor, but we should note that the way that Aliyev achieved success partly is through buying off politicians.
Mhm.
This is what the Azerbaijani Laundromat was about. There have been many European politicians that have been implicated in this
Paid off.
laundromat, where
Let's
they,
just say
yeah,
it. Paid off.
they've been paid off. So yeah, they've been paid off to promote and support pro-Azerbaijani and anti-Armenian positions. And one of those people was Edward Lindner, former member of Bundestag, who was found guilty of getting nearly 4 million euros from Azeri sources. And he provided various services for that money, including voting on pro-Azerbaijani measures in the European Parliament. But what's even more interesting is that, after all these years of prosecution and court trials,
What was his sentence?
9 months in prison, fully suspended.
Hovik, I know that most people would trade 9 months of their lives for $4 million because that's money well earned. Then they get off and they're scot-free.
People would commit crimes with a life sentence for that money, as long as their family would be.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, to me, this seems more like a endorsement of this kind of activity
Absolutely.
than
It says
slap on the
basically
wrist.
this
Or
is
even
good
it's not even a
business.
slap on the wrist. Yeah. Continue doing what you're doing, European politicians.
You want more information about good business? Well, last week, Armenia's government announced that it would sell its 20% stake in Viva Armenia. These shares were acquired under highly questionable circumstances in January 2024 when Fedilco Group Limited donated them to the government. And this came at a time when in 2024, it was very surprising to see so many corporations that were having problems with the Armenian government suddenly deciding to donate 12%, 20% of their overall shares, basically a stake in the company, to the Armenian government. And everybody was mystified. It's like, oh, what is it? So suddenly we become all altruistic and deciding to give it to them. That became a pattern. Well, one of the reasons I think that this one happened was because telco was considered critical and national security infrastructure. And Pashinyan, I think, went on the air and announced that if that was the case, then Armenia should have a presence at the table, should have a say in this critical infrastructure. Well, now they've unceremoniously sold it. Or I think I saw the amount was like $50 million, but I'd have to check that again. There have been so many of these things that all those announcements were made, all those justifications were brought forward, and then suddenly the government sells it back for money. What do you think?
I mean, I can't add anything else other than even today, when we're talking about nationalizing the assets or nationalizing the electric networks of Armenia, the argument is being brought forward that, it's Armenia's strategic infrastructure, critical infrastructure. Armenian government should have a stake. But what's in reality going to happen is that property is going to be resold for. I'm sure that people are getting rich while doing this as well, but for political expediency as well. So when Pashinyan essentially almost forced Russia's MTS, I would say, to
Yeah, if it wanted to
sell
continue
it,
doing business in Armenia, then you have to
yeah.
relinquish 20% shares to the Armenian
No,
government.
well, what happened was it forced MTS to sell its shares through various different persecutions, investigations and so
Mhm.
forth, so harassment. And then after that, the new company that acquired the phone network gave part of its shares to the Armenian government. So amazing how that works. And then just like that, now the Armenian government ends up selling it.
Yeah. Other companies, Zangezur Molybdenum Combine and the Amusar Gold Mine, which almost came to fruition back in, what was it, 2017, 2018. And then eco activists suddenly stopped this whole thing I guess now for about 7 or 8 years. But then it was allowed to restart this project. Of course, with
Yeah.
a certain number of the shares transferred to the government of Armenia.
And most of those eco-activists are now part of the government in Armenia.
Ministers of government. But let me also add, even if all of the money, the $50 million or whatever, hundreds of millions of dollars, eventually make their way to the Armenian treasury, these deals are being brokered, and somebody's making a lot of money in the middle. And guess who would be making the money? I have one final item, I guess. We can talk about Pashinyan and indecent language. Most people will be going, it's like, what? Really? Something like that? Well, Armenia's anti-corruption committee has found that Nikol Pashinyan is in breach of ethics after reviewing public complaints that he used very bad words, the F word, but we can't say that on Groong because we're a family-friendly show. So he used it in social media. And an opposition claimed that he called a political opponent a scumbag during a parliamentary debate was found to be true. What do you think he's going to get for this? Pre-trial detention? Years in prison?
Speaking about things that are against, that are potentially criminal in nature, he has multiple times said, if I ever do something wrong, you can cut off my hands, and other gory things like you can you put me under a firing squad, you can shoot me, you can, and he always uses this gory, violent language. But I bet he'll get none of that. Probably even something better than European parliamentarians get for being, on the Azerbaijani payroll.
Right. That's right. But that's all I have. Anything else?
Yeah, that's all. Is this not enough? Are you not entertained, Asbed?
If this is all the corruption that there is in Armenia, I think it's doing fine. But this is just the tip of the iceberg, as they say.
In reality, we have to cut a lot from this section because it's been several weeks since we've done the kitchen sink. And Asbed gets really upset when we...
I do. This is already going to an
much.
hour and whatever. I don't even know, an hour and 20 minutes. I like the shows under an hour. And, well, maybe we should eventually separate these and we'll have a kitchen sink playlist.
Let us know what you think about our shows.
Yeah,
because I keep telling Asbed that our listeners don't mind us having long shows, but he seems to disagree. So let us know what you think.
Yeah, tell us. We don't have to guess at what you're thinking. Tell us about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, folks. Well, that was our weekend review show recorded on August 18, 2025. Earlier in the show, we were talking with Dr. Sergei Melkonian, who is currently a research fellow at APRI Armenia, a Yerevan-based think tank. He served as assistant to President of Armenia, Armen Sarkisyan, on foreign policy matters for the Middle East and post-Soviet space. Sergei is also a guest lecturer at Yerevan State University and the Russian-Armenian University.
Just one more thing, please find us on social media. And if you haven't subscribed, like, share, and subscribe, obviously, to us so that we can get in front of many more eyes. I'm Hovik Manucharyan from Yerevan.
And I'm Asbed Bedrossian in Los Angeles. We'll talk to you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.